My dear friend James, there I was last evening, 13 miles distant at the town of York, where, of course, they were celebrating the grand victory over Lord Cornwallis back in 1781. Oh, they had many festivities last evening. In fact, they were somehow able to procure the same tent used by General Washington during the course of the siege. You see, it outlined the dance floor. And in the attic of the Thomas Nelson Jr. house, they were able to find some candles. They were supposedly owned by Lord Cornwallis himself. And there they outlined the dance floor. Now, I do find this a bit difficult to believe that candles could have survived in an attic in Tidewater, Virginia for over 40 long years. But nonetheless, we did enjoy ourselves dancing many of the popular dances of the 1780s, the minuets, the quadrilles, some of the Scottish reels. Oh, I truly enjoyed myself. But my friend, there next to the tent, I saw a cannon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would you, General Lafayette, even remark upon seeing a cannon, being a soldier all of your life and seeing many cannons upon the field of battle?
Indeed.
Well, you remember, of course, quite well the Siege of Yorktown. Well, it was during the siege, as I entered into the entrenchments, as I looked over the enemy lines, I all of a sudden saw a puff of smoke. It was the enemy firing their cannons in my direction. Well, I looked to my left, I looked to my right. There was no place for me to hide. The only place for me to be safe was underneath the carriage of that cannon. So I dove underneath. The cannonball fired at me, hit the barrel, bounced off, and saved my life.
Oh.
Believe it or not, James, the same cannon that had saved my life was right there next to the tent. Oh, do you know, I embraced that cannon last evening as if it was a long-lost friend. Oh, truly a delightful evening. But, my friend, that was but a cannon. You, my dear friend, after not being able to see you for 40 long years, I am sure the hug and the embrace that I had given you earlier today shall not be forgotten, and it was certainly better than hugging a cannon. Oh, James,
I hope so.
In this year of 1824, it is truly a delight, an honor, a pleasure to see you again, and I am so pleased to see that you thrive. But so much time has passed.
Indeed.
So many events have traveled underneath the bridge, and I lost track of you for some time. Would you be so kind as to share what happened to you since our last meeting in 1784?
Well, if you remember, we have to go a little further back because before 1784, the last time I saw you was after the Siege of Yorktown in 81.
Of course.
And of course, after that victory, you made your way back to France.
I was ordered by the king. This time I obeyed him.
And that meant that it was now time for me to go before the legislature to hopefully gain my freedom for having served you as a spy during the war.
Indeed, as I remember correctly, any man of color who had served in the Continental Army, who was formerly a slave, would be granted their freedom as a result. Was that not the case?
Well, I thought so, but it was told to me that it was only for soldiers who'd served in place of their masters. And because I had not worn a uniform nor ever carried a musket when I served you, I was not considered a soldier. On top of that, I had not served in place of William Armistead, who owned me at the time. As far as they were concerned, I had volunteered. So I was not to be given my freedom for having served you. I went back to slavery. I went back to William Armistead, and the years continued to pass. And I remember 3 years later, in 1784, when you returned to America.
To celebrate the Grand Victoire, yes.
Indeed. And we met, and you were unbelievably shocked to find that I was still enslaved. You were livid. And if I remember, you wrote a letter to the legislature telling them, is that what I think it is?
It is, my friend. I carry this letter upon my person. The letter that I wrote on your behalf. It is dated the 21st day of November of the year 1784, simply referred to as a recommendation for James. This is to certify that the bearer by the name of James has done essential service to me while I had the honor to command in this state. His intelligences from the enemy's camp were industriously collected and faithfully delivered. He perfectly acquitted himself with some important commissions I gave him, and appears to me entitled to every reward his situation can admit of, done in my hand, this 21st day of November, 1784.
Beautiful. That letter went before the legislature, and you returned to France. You have no idea what happened after that.
I did not, my friend.
Was not given my freedom for it. The years continued to pass, Gilbert. 1785 passed, 1786 passed. It wasn't until 3 years after that letter that I had to draft up my own petition for freedom, for manumission. I presented that to the legislature once again with that letter from you, and it was finally taken up. And it wasn't until February of 1787 that I was finally granted my freedom for my contributions to American liberty and independence. And even in that legislation, it is written that the main reason they freed me was due to what was in that letter.
It fills my heart with joy, my friend, that I, in some way, shape, or form, was able to assist you.
But from what I understand, I'm not the only person that you assisted either. I haven't spoken to you in 40 years, but there were rumors. There were rumors of you having had a discussion with President Washington, with you having taken it upon yourself to free my people. Were those rumors true?
Indeed they were, my friend. We, of course, had our many conversations in regard to the freeing of the slaves, of your Declaration of Independence, which stated that all men are created equal. Well, upon the conclusion of the war, in fact, before I even returned in 1784, I had written a letter to General Washington stating many things, but first amongst them was that this would be a golden time for you, General, to set the example for others to follow by emancipating the slaves. Thereby others could follow suit, and you could eradicate this horrible institution. Of course, the General would return my letter and write that I was a credit to humanity for making such a suggestion, but he was fearful that he could not do this. He felt that it must be done slowly and through legislation for fear of a grand slave revolt on par with that of the great Spartacus of the 1st century BC. Well, of course, my friend, this did not sit well. So I thought perhaps my actions would speak louder than my words or the written letter. So my wife, Adrienne, and her mother, truth be told, we decided to establish a free former slave colony. We purchased a plot of land and a colony in French Guiana. This colony cost 125,000 French livres, a tremendous amount of money. But the money was not important. What was important was the example that was going to be set. So with this colony that was established, I would provide educators, equipment, supplies, anything that could be used to establish a colony and educate those former slaves. And what happened? It flourished. And an example had been set, and other examples would follow. But, my friend, you have read the gazettes. You knew that revolution was right upon the horizon.
Indeed.
And revolution came to France. And, in fact, I and all of the people of France were quite hopeful that this would bring about a change. We had an absolute monarchy in which the king ruled absolutely, but it was time for the change. Now, I was in favor of establishing a constitutional monarchy. We would keep the king as the chief executive, not unlike your president of these United States, but we would establish the equivalent of your Congress, or in England, a parliament. We called it an Assemblée Nationale, a national assembly of elected representatives of the people. So the people that were freely elected could speak on behalf of the people they represented. I had written a document with the assistance of my friend Thomas Jefferson, of course, the writer of the Declaration of Independence. This said document was called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Indeed, it would be a preamble to all French constitutions, in which I spoke and preached of the natural rights of mankind, that of life, liberty, property, the pursuit of happiness, and freedom from oppression. All would be equal under the law, no matter the color of their skin. Indeed, all would be welcome. As so many things during the Revolution, things began to change quickly, and not all of this would be adopted, and changes would be made. But I am ever vigilant, my friend, to continue down that road in the hope that freedom for all will be accepted. The Revolution came. Soon the people were in favor of a republic instead of the monarchy. Soon I became unpopular, was forced to flee France. I was imprisoned by the Austrians for 5 years. Bonaparte would find success in northern Italy against the Austrians, and eventually I would be released. But I was not even permitted to return back to France at first, for there was fear that even I, General Lafayette, would try to take over the government. Can you imagine?
No.
Well, eventually Bonaparte would perform his coup d'etat, become master of France, and in truth we did not agree on many things, so I retired to private life until, of course, his defeat at Waterloo on the 18th of June, 1815. And then I would return back to politics in the hope that I could make a difference in France, fighting for the rights of mankind. But since then, my friend, I have returned back to America, courtesy of your very own President of these United States, Monsieur James Monroe, to be a guest of the nation, to tour all 24 United States and territories. I still find that a bit difficult to believe. 24 United States? Do you know, James, the last time I was here, you had but 13. Yeah. At this rate, you'll have as many as 50 one day. Could you imagine?
I could not imagine that.
But, friend, at this time, here in Williamsburg, Virginia, I am told that there are many of the populace of not only Williamsburg, not only the United States, but all across the globe that have questions and curiosities of us. Shall we entertain their questions?
Sure.
We open the floor to all of you, and Monsieur Ziarko, indeed, would you please bring forth some of these said questions?
Yes, we have people joining us here from all over these United States. A question Lisa has for you, General Lafayette. How did you know you could trust James at first? And really, how did you even meet?
Indeed, a superb question. How did I know I could trust James? Indeed, I would ask that you assist me with answering this question, James.
Indeed.
Of course, I had been dispatched by General Washington to Virginia in March of 1781. I was to take command of a newly formed unit called the Light Infantry Division. I was given 3 tasks by the General. 1, it was to capture the turncoat Benedict Arnold, who had been dispatched by his new English masters to Virginia. 2, to prevent the enemy from capturing all of the vitally needed supplies that were to be found here in this breadbasket of North America. And 3, well, when General Washington gave the order, I was either to support him in his assault upon New York City or to support his able subordinate General Nathaniel Greene fighting in the Carolinas. Little did I know the final conflict would be here in Virginia. Well, it was at that time that James came into my service. Do you recall our first meeting, my friend?
I do. I seem to remember there was a shipment from the public stores. At the time, I was owned by William Arbestead. He was the commissary of the public stores,
yes,
or the public warehouses, and goods were being shipped to you because of the war effort. And there had been a shipment that had been sent to you in error. And I remember being told that I was to deliver the proper goods to you personally. And upon entering where you were staying at the time, you actually began to talk to me in a way that I had not expected, in a way that I was not used to a white gentryman speaking to me.
I do recall that moment, my friend, because you had not only brought what I had requested, the correct shipment of musket flints, as I recall,
Oh, indeed, yep.
but you had also brought a gift from your former master, William Armistead, and it was a box filled with spirits, American whiskey, claret, all sorts of delights. And I had asked that you open one of those bottles, and we sat just as we are sitting now with drink in hands, and that is when I posed questions to you.
Indeed, the question I will always remember that you asked me was, at what age did I know that I was a slave, and how did that make me feel? Someone's asked me this question before, and I will never forget my answer to you. I said I was born in 1748, but I remember my first memories being around 1752, 1753, and all I can remember is that something didn't feel right in my heart. But when you're 4 or 5 years old, you can't really put your thoughts into words. You whine or you cry or you get angry. That's how a 4 or 5 year old shares their feelings, right?
The way some adults as well.
Indeed. But it wasn't until I was an adult that I was able to put into words what I must have been feeling as that 5-year-old child. And it was that there's one great gift that the Lord above has given to every man, woman, and child on this earth, and it is our free will. And what sort of relationship can you have with your God when man, not God, has taken that away from you? Even at 5 years old, I knew in my heart that a great gift had been stripped away from me, and I was angry and sad about that. That was one of the first questions you asked me, and I will never forget it. You asked me about my family. You asked me questions about my life. I didn't know what to do. We were also drinking quite a bit as well, if I remember correctly. And we talked through the night, did we not? And I remember stumbling out from your dwelling, and you saying to me as I'm making my way back to the public stores, I shall have to talk to your master about you, my dear James. I had no idea that what you wanted to talk to him about was to, well, offer me a place within your army as a spy.
Indeed, my friend. And it was that foundation that was built between the two of us, that trust that enabled me to trust James into the future as he did become a spy. He was hesitant at first, were you not?
Well, indeed I was. I didn't know if I could trust Gilbert either. I had just met him. I thought of what my decision could be, and honestly, because I knew he was such an important man, my master would not allow me to say no to him. I knew that I was either going to serve him as a spy, which was unbelievably dangerous. It meant that I would be put to death if anyone found out what I was doing. But the other choice was to make my way to the British lines and just simply stay there.
That's right. Were not Lord Dunmore going to offer freedom for the slaves, or even the Philipsburg Proclamation? But you did it, did you not, my friend? You did it, and much of that information that you provided for me was vital in bringing us victory at Yorktown.
Indeed.
But the trust had been established, and that was what was most important.
Wonderful. In fact, you, I think, in there answered Tina's question, because she asked how James knew that he could trust you, General Lafayette.
Perfect question.
But our next question actually is a perfect continuation of what you were saying. Amanda wants to know what some of the most valuable or informative acts of espionage that you performed during the late war, Mr. Lafayette. Can you share those, or are those still secret?
Well, I have to ask my commanding officer on that. May I share those stories?
Of course, it is. The time has passed 40 years since the end of the war, so I think it is safe to divulge those secrets, my friend.
Once a commanding officer, always a commanding officer. Probably the most important piece of information that I learned during my time with Benedict Arnold and with General Cornwallis was, at the time, Cornwallis was in Portsmouth, and no one knew where he was going to head next. Maybe he was going to head back down to North Carolina. They had already destroyed much of North Carolina. They could run rampant through there. Or were they going to head further west into Virginia, further north up into northern Virginia, or into Maryland? Actually, yes, this map.
Yes, the same map that we used, my friend.
Indeed, it is. It brings back quite a few memories. But he was in Portsmouth, and no one knew south, north, west. I was able to see his papers and read them, as well as listen to him talking during dinner to his subordinates, because oftentimes, though we enslaved individuals were everywhere, most people didn't even notice that we were around. And what he was saying was that he was looking for a deep water port and a means of resupply for the Chesapeake Bay and a means of retreat by land in case of siege. Then I heard Gloucester Point, which then told me that he was going to be making his way to Yorktown. And most of you probably know just how important that Battle of Yorktown was. That victory didn't end the war for us, but it was the decisive victory that the Americans needed to know that we would have our freedom and our independence from Great Britain. And that was news that I'd shared with Gilbert.
So there's a question here from Henry, who's visiting us from very far away. And he wanted to know, were there others in the Army who agreed or disagreed with you? This is for the Marquis, on the use of slaves as spies. Doug also wants to know that it seems like you have a genuine friendship, but you were aware of, or were you ever aware of how others viewed your relationship? Certainly, I'm sure this raised a few eyebrows.
Absolutely excellent questions. And were there other men of color who actually, or women, who served as spies? The reality is that the best spy are people you don't know that they are spies at all. Of course, that is the nature of espionage. We do not want the enemy to know that someone is spying on them. So that means it does not necessarily need to be a man. It could be a woman. It could be a child, for that matter. Anyone who is able to procure information from the enemy and deliver that information could be used as a spy. So whether it be my spy ring here in Virginia, whether it be His Excellency General Washington's around New York and Long Island and Connecticut, many different spies were used as a result. In regards to the second question, as were there other like-minded people such as myself, and what did people think of this relationship? Well, not everyone was aware of the relationship that I had with James. Indeed, he was being used as a spy, but I did not tell anybody that, nor did James. Again, that is the essence of him being a spy. But there are others, and I am thankful for it, and have continued to grow, that were of the opinion that there should be freedom for the slaves. So I was not the only individual who was in want of freedom or the abolition of slavery, I'm thankful to say. One man who comes to mind, who unfortunately met his death in 1782, we served as part of General Washington's military family. His name was John Lawrence from South Carolina, a friend of myself, of Alexander Hamilton, and all part of that military family, serving the general as best we could, but also of like mind in freeing the slaves.
Indeed. And if you want to talk a bit more about our relationship, as far as I think the first public declaration of that was probably when we met again on the streets of Richmond just recently, was it not?
Exactly, my friend. In fact, you knew of my approach and you had made a request in the newspaper, did you not?
I did. I made a request to hopefully be able to be properly equipped enough to come and see you again after 40 years. And though I was not originally granted an audience with you, I have no idea how you recognized me in a crowd of thousands of people from your carriage. But you saw my eyes and you knew exactly who I was. You stopped the carriage, you jumped out, and you embraced me in the middle of the streets of Richmond, which is something that does not happen often in the streets of Richmond. And I think that's maybe why I appreciated you, Gilbert, was that America functioned in a particular manner during that time and still does to this day in 1824. There's still those of my people who are still owned by others. But you never seemed to care that that was the manner in which you were expected to behave. You seem to behave in the way that you expected to be right. It was another reason why I trusted you, I think.
Thank you, my friend.
And along those lines, there are two questions here that I think speak to that. Andrew wants to know, is it true, General Lafayette, that you challenged Thomas Jefferson and Mr. Madison, President Madison, on their ideas and views of slavery? And Paige was also wondering how you felt when you came back here and still saw that little had changed.
Yes, superb questions in regards to my two dear friends, Monsieur Jefferson and Monsieur Madison, in regards to the institution of slavery. Of course, I met Monsieur Jefferson only once during the war when he was serving as governor during a rather difficult time. Virginia had been invaded by not only the turncoat Benedict Arnold, but shortly thereafter General Phillips and then Lord Cornwallis. So we spoke in brief. It would be his time while serving as ambassador to France from 1784 to 1789 that our relationship would blossom. And that is where I spoke with him of my views upon slavery and the hope that America could eradicate the horrible institution. Indeed, we spoke at length of his Declaration of Independence, which stated that all men are created equal. So why could not all be welcome under that banner of American freedom, no matter the color of their skin, who their parents were, or how much money they had within their pocket, but simply by what they could do and offer to this nation? And indeed, Monsieur Jefferson was of like mind in many things, but he felt constrained. He felt conflicted in the way to go about doing it. Monsieur Madison was not unlike him as well. We, of course, had developed a friendship after the Siege of Yorktown, really an acquaintance at first, for he was a representative of Congress, had met me in Baltimore City as I was preparing to return back to France. But in 1784, upon my return, I took part in an expedition up the Hudson River, there to negotiate a treaty with a Native American tribe known as the Oneida, part of the Six Nation of the Iroquois. Of course, we had established some sort of treaty in 1778, but it was temporary. So by 1784, this was to be an official American treaty that would be long-lasting. And these native peoples needed to be treated and welcomed into this new nation, or at least the offer must be made. So it was during that time Mr. Madison and myself spoke of ending the institution of slavery, but welcoming all under the banner of American freedom. It is my hope that we shall continue that conversation in the hope that we can find a solution and bring an end to that horrible institution.
Thank you, General Lafayette. Mr. Lafayette, there are a few questions on the intricacies of espionage and wanted to know how you communicated with one another. Scott is asking that, Lisa's asking that, so if you could speak a little bit to some of the specifics of you and your time as a spy.
There are more ways to communicate information as a spy than I could probably speak here in a number of hours. So what I will do is I'll talk on a few of the methods that I used more often than not. The British were not aware of the fact of how well I could read, for one thing, which meant that I could look at their papers and they would not think that I would be able to understand what was written there. That meant that I could transcribe that, possibly, but that compromises me. And when a spy is compromised, compromising means death. So I have to be careful about what's on my person. So I'm probably not going to have whatever I wrote transcripted be written out as I saw it. I'm going to have to write it in code. You're going to have to write things in code. But on top of that, if someone gets something and they can tell that it's in code, well, then you've been compromised again. So what do? I can't have these papers on me making my way back to the American forces. If I'm caught by either side, it's going to look like I'm spying for either side. That meant that oftentimes I would use what was called a dead drop. There were places where if I could not handle sensitive information, I could drop that sensitive information out there and leave. And there would be someone, oftentimes, I wouldn't even know who that person was, but they knew where that drop was. They would come, they would take it, and they would then convey it back to whomever needed to know about it. Having said that, the most important tool that any spy has is right up here. Because most of what I would have to return and learn, I would have to memorize. I would have to learn some way within my head, because that could not be compromised from me. I could make my way back to the American forces and share everything that was in my head, and no one would have been able to find it on me. So the best manner I found to use was to learn that information and then to be able to share that information as accurately as possible when I made my way back to the American forces.
There are two questions here that complement one another wonderfully. Paige would like to know, Mr. Lafayette, when you decided to take Lafayette as your name. And General Lafayette, Leslie would like to know how you felt upon understanding and learning that James was now James Armistead Lafayette.
When I took the name of Lafayette in 1787, upon gaining my freedom in February of that year, unfortunately, I was not in contact with Gilbert at the time. The French were beginning their revolution, and it was not quite so easy to correspond with him. So, to be completely honest, until this week, when we've seen each other again after 40 years, I had not had the chance to tell him that my last name was Lafayette. The reason why I took the name of Lafayette, during my time of being owned by William Armistead, I didn't have a last name. And when the time came to choose one, I thought I needed to choose a name that meant the most to me. And as thinking of the people in my lives who mean the most to me, my wife. But my wife was owned as I was, therefore she, had no last name either. My children, they were owned by the master of their mother. By law, they didn't have last names either. As I went through family, we all didn't have last names. But when I went through the list of the people that were most important in my life of being where I am today, the Marquis Gilbert's name is one of the first ones. Was the first one to come into my mind, and I could think of no better choice than to choose the name of someone who truly did something. Didn't just use words, as many others have. He truly did something to help me to gain my freedom, and I can think of no better name to take than Lafayette.
How you honor me so, my dear, dear friend, and how does that make me feel? It fills my heart with joy, with happiness. Indeed, though we were not born in the same family, we have become like brothers, have we not?
We have.
Through the turbulent difficulties of the war, through the trials and tribulations of life that we have both endured, we have one thing in common, and that is that connection from that time of the war. So now we share the same name, that of Lafayette. Oh, thank you, my dear friend. You have truly honored me and filled me with happiness.
Thank you for the opportunities. We live in times unlike any other in this country, and it fills me with joy to be with you today, sitting, talking with the people of America about how we move forward as Americans. For though you are from France, we consider you an American.
As do I, my friend.
Janice had a question of how long do you plan on touring here? And this meeting between the two of you, it happened in Richmond, is that correct?
Indeed. Thank you, Janice, for your question. How long shall I be touring, and where did this meeting take place? It first took place in Richmond town, for I was traveling in Richmond City in my carriage, as James has stated eloquently earlier, in which I saw James upon the side of the street, stopped, told the coachman to stop immediately, There we met with one another and embraced and rekindled this fine friendship after 40 long years. Though we find ourselves in Williamsburg City now, perhaps with the hope of reenacting that same first meeting in which your former master, James Armistead, gave us those spirits. I think perhaps we shall raise a glass to American freedom, liberty, and most of all to our friendship. Indeed. But as far as me concerned, as how does all of this is concerned, the first part of that question from Janice?
How long is this tour going to take?
How long is the tour? It shall be roughly 13 months. You have more than 13 states now 24. So upon my arrival, making my way down the East Coast, I am here in Williamsburg at present, but I shall venture further to the west to Charlottesville and visit with my friend Thomas Jefferson at Monticello, as well as Montpellier to meet with Monsieur Madison. Then I shall return to the Maison Blanche, the White House, to spend the Christmastide with the President of the United States, Monsieur Monroe, then travel southwards with the new year. I shall go all the way to Georgia, of which I have never been, then cross over to Nouvelle-Orléans, or New Orleans, as you call it, and travel up the Mississippi River into the Kentucky region, then crossing over into the Ohio Valley, the upper part of the state of New York, and then back down to the Maison Blanche, where perhaps you shall have elected a new president, for I am told there is an election next year, and I am told one of the offspring of Monsieur Adams, a John Quincy Adams, shall be running for president as well. So who knows what shall occur there. So this trip shall take 13 months, and I shall visit all of your glorious states.
Thank you very much, General. This next one, and it's probably going to be our second to last. We might have time for this one and one other. And Lisa was asking you, Mr. Lafayette, about your wife and your children, if they've been able to earn their freedom, and you haven't really talked much about your personal life. So,
Indeed. Upon gaining my freedom in 1787, my wife was owned by someone else, and our children would also, by law, be owned by that very same master. They were not freed with me. So what I had to do was find work, find a place to live, and save up enough money to be able to then buy my wife and children from their master. Now, once I buy them, and that's quite a bit of money to buy them, I would have to make a deal with their master probably to not buy them quite at market value. But then, at that point in time, before now, the laws were quite a bit different, but one of the laws meant that when I bought my children from their master, I would not be able by Virginia law to free them, because the law stated that if you wanted to free a slave that was under the age of majority, under the age of adulthood, you could not free them unless you put enough money aside in trust for them to be taken care of so that that did not become a burden of the state. And I would never have that much money. And as slave laws are written not with freed blacks trying to free their family, it's written with white slaveholders in mind, they are the majority. It meant that I had to make sure that I stayed alive until my children reached their majority, because under the law, even though I wouldn't treat them at home as my enslaved individuals, they would be owned by me. If I were to die and I had debts, as everyone has debts, well, what do they do when you die and you have debts?
They sell your property.
Indeed, and my most expensive pieces of property would have been my children, which meant that my children would have been sold off first in order to pay off my debts. They call this a peculiar institution, this slavery that we find ourselves dealing with. I was able to eventually buy them, free them. The law did not prohibit me from freeing my wife as soon as I bought her. So I did that. We were able to find freedom. I was able to buy some derelict land in New Kent County, and the land could at least be grown upon, and I built a home there with my family. Continued, as I saved up more money, to buy more family members, and as the law allowed me, I freed many of them, though the laws then changed to state that if I did free them, they could no longer stay in Virginia or else they could be re-enslaved, which meant then I had to make the choice of whether I wanted to have a family member with me and take the chance of them being re-enslaved again, or them no longer being able to come into Virginia ever again so that they could keep their freedom. It has not been an easy journey to gain the freedom of my wife, my children, and many of my family members. But to this day, I have freed more family members than I can count on both hands, and I'm very proud of having been able to do that.
All right, this last question was originally posed to you, General Lafayette, but I imagine both of you can speak to these ideas. Andrea asked way at the beginning, what was your favorite part of America when you came back to visit? But Gia also noted that you did not choose to retire here in the United States. So maybe some of the things that you really like about this visit, that you've learned about America, but also maybe if there were any reasons of why you chose to retire and stay in France and not come here. And I'm sure, James, you might wish to speak to some of the changes you've seen here.
Indeed, what do I like best about America? And I would say it is American liberty, but though it has not been fully achieved as a result. So upon my return, even though my journey has just begun, there is still much to be seen. I have never seen Georgia and all of the states that cross over to Louisiana and upwards the Mississippi, over to Ohio, and then to the Maison Blanche once again. So there is much that is new to me. So perhaps I should reserve fully that question for upon the completion of my visit here. But what I do love about America, from the time I was here in 1781, or my first steps upon American soil in South Carolina in June of 1777, is the mixture of cultures. That as I would travel through the various states and see the differences of the people, their culture, their customs, their beliefs, their thoughts, well, that is what made America great to me. The differences, as one man called it up in New York, a melting pot. I thought that was apropos, because bringing all of these ideas and cultures and thoughts together, you are getting the best of all the world into one place, and that place happens to be America. So indeed, I have looked forward to seeing friends, but new discoveries here as well, and to see that the nation has prospered, still needing a long way to go, or having a long way to go, but I am hopeful for its future.
And when I think of my favorite part of America, it is the idea of it. It is what it was originally meant to represent from the moment that Thomas Jefferson put pen to paper and with others wrote a document that was meant to say why we were no longer going to be British and why we had to be American. That idea of representation, that idea of everyone having a word within the form of the government with which was going to be made, an idea that many of us were not a part of being allowed to realize at the time, but the words were put out there, the words were written, and the words are there. Any American can read those words. And the thought that maybe a time will come when a man such as myself does not have to buy his wife and children in order to truly be with them, that maybe once I am long gone from this earth, that my children will be able to live in a world where they are given equal protections, equal liberty. That is what I am hoping those written words meant. And I hope that that is where we are making our way towards, with those words being recognized. All of our programs are made possible by the generosity of our donors. Thank you for your support.